students from the same school with similar kinds of things who didn't.
Right in the lights, though.
You were going to come to the podium and manage
Yep.
it?
Yeah, yeah.
I guess all the students have stayed there.
They told them they had to.
That's all right. No, that's fine, that's fine. No, I think maybe this is more for like other people.
I guess.
Well, it's for whoever's going to come.
Yeah.
Those are the best gifts. I think we can effectively get started. So today's panel is going to be quantum literacy for non-scientists, and we have two very distinguished pioneers in teaching and educating and thinking about how to best teach and educate students in this space. So we're starting with Jim Freyricks here from Georgetown University, and I'll introduce you, Steph. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to, both Shanjalek and I decided we're going to just start off with some short presentations. And just to give you a sense of what motivated me to get involved in this is I kind of view quantum mechanics as one of the crowning intellectual achievements of humankind. I mean, when you create a device that can measure distances to 1 part in 21, which is what the LIGO Gravitational Wave Observatory does, that's the equivalent of measuring the distance between New York and Los Angeles to an accuracy of something on the order of smaller than the size of an atom. And so it's a remarkable achievement. It's only possible with quantum mechanics, and yet probably less than 1 in 1,000 people have the slightest clue of what quantum mechanics is, aside from saying things like, oh, there's a Heisenberg's uncertainty principle and other things like that. And I wanted to find a way to bring quantum mechanics to essentially to everyone. And so I created a course which is called Quantum Mechanics. Hope this is working. For everyone. And the way that I teach it is trying to be as inclusive as possible. So I like to call the times when an authority figure, gets frustrated in trying to explain something because you're just not getting it, and they just say, well, this is the way that it is. That's proof by intimidation. So we're not going to do any of that. We're not going to dumb down the material. We're not going to teach them things that when they actually try to learn quantum mechanics in more detail, they have to unlearn what we taught them. So everything that they learn, they're going to actually be used. They're going to learn by doing, and we're going to use simulations to take care of illustrating and working with the more complicated mathematical materials. And the basis for the course is the book called QED by Richard Feynman, which teaches the quantum mechanics of light with actually a very quantitatively correct model that just requires you to draw arrows on a piece of paper. And then there's a wonderful book by Daniel Steyer which extends those Feynman ideas to a set of experiments called the Stern-Gerlach experiment, which involves sending atoms through inhomogeneous magnets where the atoms then separate according to the value of a property called spin. And Edward Taylor is a person who recognized that these books and the ideas in these books come much more to life when you use animations to animate them. And It's a 4 weeks worth of content. We introduce the quantum mechanical world with the Stern-Gerlach experiment. We then do very advanced concepts with spin, including things like the Bell test experiments, which is what the Nobel Prize was just awarded for yesterday, I guess. We then talk about the quantum mechanics of light, and then we do advanced topics of light, such as how you can observe things without shining light on it. And that's, you heard me correctly, you don't shine light on it, but you can see it. And that's possible with quantum mechanics. So to illustrate how this works, we start off with things like showing precession with a bicycle wheel, and then we get into animations. And I had this wonderful undergraduate who did all these animations for me. This is a classical current loop. When it goes through the magnet, it precesses, but it also feels a force. And then the force gets magnified the farther away it goes until it hits the screen and it hits at a particular position. And I'm not going to be able to have the time to show you all this, so I'm going to skip to the atomic case where here we don't know what it's doing, so we depict it with just a spherical ball, but we find when we send it through the same device, rather than just taking a continuum of values, it only has one of two different values. And even if we rotate the system, which should, we find that we get the same result. We get one of two different cases when it hits the screen. And this is one of the fundamental properties of quantum mechanics. And then this is how we depict a Bell experiment. We have the same kind of analyzer, but it has 3 different positions that it can take. And it either is going to emerge with a positive projection or a negative projection. And this device shines a light that says, oh, it was positive, or oh, it was negative. But it doesn't tell you which position it was on. And the device can rotate into one of these 3 different positions. And from this, when you analyze this using quantum mechanics, you get one result. When you analyze it using what's called hidden variables, or you just have some instructions that you use ahead of time, you get a different result. So using this experiment, you can actually verify that quantum mechanics is the correct theory of the world. And in terms of inclusiveness, we try to emphasize that everyone can be a quantum mechanic. You can see here they have their large wrench that they're holding because sometimes they're really hard entangled wave functions that they have to try to work with. And that's also a smock to make sure that they don't get too dirty when they're working on their quantum mechanics. And this MOOC is currently rated number 6 of the best MOOCs of all time on Class Central. We've had 50,000 students enrolled in the class and counting. And I offer it every year along with 2 other MOOCs that do quantum mechanics in a more advanced level for like at the advanced undergraduate level. And with that, you were going to introduce her.
Thank you. Thanks, Jim. That was a really good segue into my presentation, please.
University of Pittsburgh, great friend, actually helped me attain the position I have now. So thank you very much. And
Thank you, Russell. All right, so I'm going to actually be talking about how to teach quantum literacy to non-physicists by preparing early learners and public for a quantum future. And my focus will be on National Q12 Partnership, which works with Q212. And this is something that is supported by the National Science Foundation. And the PI for this project is Emily Edwards from University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. And co-PI is Diana Franklin. So I work with them. So one thing that I want to be very clear about, and it's interesting that a lot of students have been asking me here about whether you need to necessarily be a physicist in order for you to actually be in quantum. And the answer is no. There are lots of different possibilities in quantum, as you can see, that success in quantum information science and engineering depends upon scientists, engineers, entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, policymakers, and business people, so people who actually write project reports and put out communications that are correct as opposed to all the wrong things that are out there in the media. And so we need people with lots of different kinds of backgrounds, as you can see here. And we need to prepare everybody for a quantum future, as we just discussed, in the morning session, right? So our National Q12 partnership is actually focused on this idea, and Q2Work is trying to make this happen. So, so what are the efforts that are currently underway? So you can see that there are many, many things. So Mark Ridders in the morning talked about the fact that there was this key concept workshop that took place about 2.5 years ago, and Jim and I were also involved in that particular effort that put out what are the key concepts that we should actually be teaching to students related to quantum, not just at the college level, but also at the K through 12 level, right? How can we actually educate people so that they know something about quantum and the fact that our future is going to have quantum incorporated into it in everything we do? And there are many new programs, and you can see that this particular National Quantum Literacy Network that we are talking about, that's also playing a key role in this thing. And then there are lots of different centers that have actually been put out with support from NSF and Department of DOE and other things like Quantum Leap, Challenge Institute, Engineering Research Center, et cetera. So there are lots of great efforts, but I think that the focus should really be on educating people who have traditionally been left out. So the goal of the Q2Work program and National Q12 partnership is to grow connections and cohesion across quantum education community and make sure to engage learners and their communities about quantum information science and technology from a very, very early stage, right? And so we want to actually establish an online hub and we want to do an outreach campaign to make sure that both informal and informal situations, we can actually get students excited about quantum and make their parents and public policy makers, who make decisions about what happens in K through 12, about the fact that quantum is really important to incorporate early into formal and informal curricula. So the goal is to inspire, grow, and support a quantum workforce that is going to be diverse, and inclusive, right? This is really important for equity and making sure that the future of quantum is actually not deprived of the talents of all the, people who are out there. Because, people have, so basically, the benefits of starting early, first and foremost, is that if you start only at the college level, you have already left out a lot of people. And if you really think about who are the people who have actually been left out, they are the people who do not have the privilege, because all the people in college people who arrive in college, they already have privilege. And people who actually choose to major in these areas already have privilege. So on the other hand, K through 12 is much more diverse. All the students are out there. So if we don't even get those students to know about quantum, we are not really going to actually diversify our workforce. We are not going to be able to make quantum equitable and inclusive, unlike the separate areas like physics or computer science or electrical engineering that hardly have any representation from diverse groups. Right? So that is the most important thing. And also, if you introduce quantum early on, you're not going to, that spooky aspect will not be there, and people wouldn't think of quantum superposition or quantum entanglement as something that is out of this world that they are not going to be able to grasp. If these ideas are introduced early, that's not going to be as spooky. So notice that these things are extremely important for traditionally marginalized people in physics, and it may not be so important. If you are here and you're thinking, why is it that quantum is important at the, K through 12 level? You should think that you already have a lot of privilege, and that is why you're thinking about it. Because my kids are not the ones who actually would necessarily need quantum at the K through 12 level, because they have been exposed to it in the informal situation a lot. So it's the students who would otherwise be deprived of these great opportunities and the joy of figuring things out. So here I'm just showing you some data. If you look at, for example, physics, it right now has only 20% women and 12% students from a traditionally marginalized group. Electrical engineering, 14% women, 19% educationally marginalized students from racial and ethnic minority groups. Computer science, 20% women and 15% educationally marginalized. This is computer science and engineering, actually. So if you look at that is the number of bachelor's degree in electrical engineering, and you can see that those three things at the bottom are showing you the number of Hispanic students, Black or African American students, and Native American students, and you can see that those numbers are vanishingly small and significantly lower than the current population. So you can see that if we really want to diversify quantum, we need to do something about it now, and we need to start early. The other thing that I wanted to say is that in the traditional fields, there is a lot of inequities right now at the college level. So here I'm going to show you some data for research on what is the percentage of students who actually declare a physics major and drop out. And what you see, this is all the different majors, and you can see that the major from which majority of the, 38% of the students are dropping out, when you consider all students, is physics. So that's the most inequitable, right? And if you look at the students from the racial and ethnic minority groups, what you see is that 65% of the students in physics, after declaring the major, are dropping out. Notice that these people love physics. That is why they declared that major. But what are we doing? No, the culture of physics is such that it is actually not really embracing those students and making them feel like they don't belong there, they don't have identity as people who can excel in physics, and they reluctantly drop out, because it is wrong that 65% of the students who declare physics in the United States are actually dropping out of the discipline after declaring it. So you can actually tell, by the way, this is from some large universities, so it doesn't include smaller universities. I don't have data on it, please. Okay, so that is an interesting question. So it turns out from physics, the dropout rate of men and women is actually comparable. So what I would say that individual interviews suggest that in a lot of these large universities from which these data have been taken, the students declare their major at the end of their first year, and a lot of women actually do not declare major in physics, even though they were planning to, after they have taken introductory physics courses. So introductory physics courses have really put them off, and they decide to major in something else. So these are only showing results from those people who actually declared a major and then decided to leave. But otherwise, the data are actually the same for men and women. But what I'm saying is that when you do individual interviews, and we have done like individual interviews with about 50 to 60 women, and they say a lot of my friends actually dropped out, and they didn't even become a major, because after the first year, they're like, this thing is not what I thought it was. It is hidden, yeah, exactly. It is hidden, so it's not going to show you from these kinds of data, because those data are showing it's comparable. Please.
Cybersecurity, and it impacts computer science. I mean, at some point, I would think that, it would be part of the curriculum.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for asking that question. And this national Q12 partnership that we have, we are actually developing a framework for teaching quantum to students at the K through 12 level. And that is actually focusing on how you can incorporate it in physics classes, chemistry classes, computer science classes, and mathematics classes. So we have a framework for all of that. And now we are going to actually work with like middle school teachers to think about how we can incorporate it at the middle school level. So absolutely. And in fact, I would say that people should be looking at the framework that we have developed. This has been done in collaboration with a lot of high school physics teachers and chemistry teachers and some computer science teachers and mathematics teachers. And there is a lot of input from the community with regard to, feedback from experts in these areas. So it's like a very nice collaborative effort between people from the universities and K through 12 level. Notice that when I say framework, I don't mean curriculum. I mean like this is a framework for how, what should be the learning objective and learning trajectories for students who are in a computer science classes and trying to learn quantum, those kinds of issues. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
And I do just want to add that there's a lot of work right now to introduce quantum in the curriculum. We're developing curriculum in QSTEAM for computer science classes, for chemistry classes, for art, for general education courses. This is all, as the Jim knows, we got a ways to go before we could really put anything out right now. But that's the idea that we're moving towards, and yes, it has to continue that way.
And out of this morning, there were the 9 pointers that you highlight. I sent a text to my wife. She's a STEM teacher in high school. I say, honey, are you doing any of these? And she just replied back, yes, I'm already doing 3 of them. So it's starting to come up.
Thank you. That's good to know. Yes, so he's saying out of the 9 key concepts, 3 of them are already being introduced. So that's a really awesome thing. So I also wanted to say that this National Q12 Partnership is also focusing on how to introduce students to quantum careers. And we have also collaborated with professional societies such as American Physical Society or American Association of Physics Teachers or National Science Teachers Association to actually promote these things. And so again, our focus is on access, outreach, careers, and connections. And I'm really excited about the, National Quantum Literacy Network Partnership also, because this is a great partnership that is really going to be useful for making sure that we don't leave out the students who have traditionally been marginalized in disciplines. And notice that, if we start a new field, because this is a very fledgling new field, with a culture that doesn't have the culture of physics or electrical engineering or computer science, but a new culture, which is inclusive and equitable to begin with, we can do wonders, and we can do much better. Like the reason we don't have theory of everything, physicists have been looking for it a long time, is because we have not really exploited the expertise of such a large number of people. So that picture that people keep showing of, this 1927 Solvay conference, if you look at it, there are lots of people missing there. There's only one woman, and everybody in that picture is white. So many of us are not represented at all. And you can see that we are really compromising quality because we have actually left out so many people from making contribution to this great area. So we would take any questions.
I had an observation about the dropout rates. I'm from a school of business. The discipline of accounting has a tremendous problem with students not wanting to take that major in spite of the unemployment rate being less than 2%. People will get jobs. The reason students are dropping out is because there are more lucrative majors elsewhere. In fact, when I looked at your data, the data that was published, in the difficult sciences, let's say sciences are considered to be difficult. Let's say physics, etc. Physics is a very difficult science, so is math. Computer science is equally difficult, but the dropout rate in computer science is much less compared to math, compared to physics, etc. Its dropouts are based to a large extent on the market forces.
So I have like 2 answers to that. First of all, let me explain why the computer science dropout rates are much lower, because this is something that I have also investigated. And computer science dropout rates are lower, at least at large research universities. I don't know about how small schools work, but the point is that computer science only allows you to, that is one of those special majors that only allows you to major in it after you have actually completed 4 different courses. So you have to have taken basic course in computer programming, network, this or that, they require 4 courses before you can declare a major. None of the other majors actually are that, stringent in terms of what the requirements are. So it could be very similar to what I was telling you about women dropping out, right? I mean, the point is that they are dropping out after the 2 physics courses in first year. Computer science actually, could have dropouts even before people have joined. The second thing is that a lot of times people are not wanting to major in something or they don't want to actually have a career in something because that's the most lucrative thing. I'm myself a university professor. I could have made a lot of money being in a company, but the point is that I love physics. Physics is something that is so exciting. It's fun. It explains, it's your universe, know the rules, and every day I get to do things that I want to do. So many people actually want to pursue their passion, and they're still dropping out. The fact that those people initially were in it, because in the end, they are doing cost-benefit analysis. And if the culture of these disciplines is such that people are like, no, people are not treating me well. And if the American Institute of Physics actually came up with this thing called Team Up Report, which was about why is it that African American students are dropping out from physics, right? And what they saw is that there were 4 or 5 factors that were responsible for it. Like one of them was their sense of belonging in physics. Another one was their identity as a person who can excel in physics. Third one was like in-class support from their instructors. Fourth was like out-of-class support. The fifth one was like lack of mentoring. They didn't feel like, a lot of people from marginalized groups are especially questioning when they struggle, whether their struggle means that they are not cut out to be there, because if nobody looks like you don't have any role models, and you struggle, you wonder whether struggling is a sign that you're not cut out to be there. When Einstein really said, if you haven't struggled, you haven't really tried to learn anything new. But notice that traditionally marginalized people, when they don't see other people like them, when they don't have role models and they struggle, they think this is a reflection that I don't belong here. So I think that what I actually want to say is that a lot of times people are doing a cost-benefit analysis. The stress of being in a discipline when it's not inclusive and equitable, and nobody looks like you and nobody cares about you, is too much to actually remain in that discipline despite your love and despite you wanting to be in that discipline. So I don't think that it's all about money, because we all are doing fine, even though we could have done so much better in terms of finances in a company, because I don't want to be there. I want to be in academia. And so people can pursue their passion, but only if they have an environment which supports them, which values them, which really treats them as people who belong there and who actually are valued part of the community. And I can clearly tell you that my discipline, which is physics, I have a degree in theoretical physics, and no, it's not equitable and inclusive at all. In fact, I was the only woman in a class of 36 women when I went to UC Santa Barbara as a graduate student. And coming from India, I thought America would be so great, where there would be a lot of equity and this and that. Nothing. My expectations went, into a black hole, never to come out. So I'm just saying that we need to reflect upon our culture, and we have to think about how we have marginalized students who have traditionally been left out, and how the next quantum revolution, the second quantum revolution, needs to be different, because we are at a point where we can make it very different from what the first quantum revolution was like, that 1927 picture that everybody's showing of the founding fathers of the first quantum revolution.
And I think Jim and I both, she speaks for many of us in the field and everything she's saying in that, and we agree very much. And some of the, a lot of the points there. I want to kick one more question. I know we're getting pushed here, but I want to kick one more question to each of the panelists really quickly, just to maybe address within 60 seconds if possible. This idea of preparation versus perseverance, or versus the types of skills, the struggle you talk about, but minoritized communities seem to have a lot of struggle that they grow up with and know. And so in your experiences, does success, is it really correlated to preparation, or is there room to think about the nature of perseverance and the nature of people's ability to persevere through struggle in this field? And Jim, you want to real quick?
Yeah, sure. My opinion is we should be rethinking the way that we teach quantum mechanics, because we can do it in a way that greatly reduces the amount of prerequisites that are needed. And even though quantum mechanics is always going to be hard, if you reduce the prerequisites that are required, you then allow more people to learn the material. And this is a project that I've been working on for a number of years. I'm working on a book that's called Quantum Mechanics Without Calculus. And you can do the entire curriculum, even all graduate level stuff, and never introduce differential equations or anything like that. So I think these are the kinds of things that we should be thinking about to make it much more accessible and inclusive to a wider group of people. But you always have to work hard. I don't think there's any way of teaching quantum mechanics where you don't have to work hard.
So I would say that, if all the separate fields whose convergence has led to quantum information science, separately have been very inequitable. And I would say that, they have only catered to the most privileged students, so basically most of the courses and curricula and instructors have mainly focused on the top 30% of the class, and they have essentially left out the rest of the students who actually went to schools with failing infrastructure, people who actually didn't even have physics or math, calculus in their high school. And notice that they all have the prerequisites to be in those courses. So an equitable outcome would be one in which we actually focus on students who have traditionally been left out, and they have the prerequisites to be there. But if we don't see that in our courses, students who have traditionally been left out are actually doing comparably to students who actually are privileged, then we have really not done a good job of intentionally focusing our resources on those groups that are traditionally left out. And I would say that there is research, and I actually can send you the paper if you'd like. There was research done with 150 instructors and more than 10,000 students by Mary Murphy's group at Indiana University, where they showed that instructors who had fixed mindset about their students' potential, and by fixed mindset, I mean, they were asked at the beginning of the course questions such as, to be frank, I know only 30% of the students will do well in this course. Agree, disagree, that kind of a thing on a Likert scale. Or, there is nothing that I can do in this course to make sure that all of my students excel. Again, agree, disagree on a 5-point scale and stuff. Those people who agreed with these kinds of things, they are instructors with fixed mindset. On the other hand, those who disagree and who say, no, I am working for all of my students, and I really want to see that every single 100% of my students excel, that's my goal. What they saw, first of all, is that the gap between minoritized students and majority students were extremely small in the classes with instructors with growth mindset as opposed to instructors with fixed mindset. And in terms of students' motivational skills and how much they wanted to actually participate in those STEM disciplines, this is only for STEM disciplines. They saw that students were much more motivated to pursue future careers and stuff in STEM areas for instructors who actually had growth mindset as opposed to fixed mindset. And notice this is a study with 150 STEM instructors with more than 10,000 students from a very large research university. So you can see that instructors' mindset and what they think about students' potential can go a long way for how the students actually feel like they belong and how they actually will excel in those courses.
Thank you so much. We're going to transition. I know we have everything here going. And as we transition off the stage and everything, I know Tomasz has a last question as we transition, but we can continue with the transition, please.
In education, in quantum, for quite a while now. In your own experience, is the US government doing enough to help develop and implement that change? And I'm told this is a secure room, so.
I don't think so. I think that US government can do a lot more. And again, making it a requirement to ensure that the outcomes are equitable would be something that US government can do through funding and other means much better than any other, institutional, administrators, for example.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of things like K through 12, the U.S. government, doesn't set the standards at the K through 12 level. They're set at the state levels. So there's a very complicated dialogue that's going to have to take place from the government to the states. And, unless quantum gets into the standards, it's going to always be an add-on and not something that's an integral part of the instruction. So I think there's lots of things the government can do. And, as is always the case, more funding will always be able to allow more to get done. So.
it looks like we're still waiting for people to come in. He said, yeah, absolutely. And I do, and I'm going to wait till some more come in, and I have something I want to address as well while I have them here and some distinguished guests.
Yes, I have one more comment. I recall graduate level physics being taught in, especially when we talk about, quantum, or they used to call it modern physics and that sort of thing. But what I found was it was difficult to connect to the material because the professors weren't able to articulate how this was meaningful to me and my reality and the universe, right? So this is a great opportunity for anyone getting into this that says, all right, our universe works in this way. We were leveraging laws and principles of the universe in this way, and this is how it impacts our physical reality. This is how it impacts you. I don't find very many people who are able to bring it to that level for connection, right? So I guess for a lot of students, it may seem very dry material. Okay, well, I learned some procedures, I learned some principles, but how does it really apply? I don't see a lot of that.
Well, I think what you're describing is, with the current way that we teach quantum mechanics, we spend much more time teaching math that you have to follow than teaching the science. We don't talk as much about experiments as we do about techniques for solving differential equations or other things like that. And that's the nature and the way in which the material is actually being taught. And if you change the way that it's taught, you can spend a lot more time talking about things that are relevant, which usually means that you want to talk about experiments and how the results of different experiments play a role in your everyday life. So you could talk about how GPS systems work. You can talk about things like how gravity waves are measured. I like to talk about how deuterium was discovered, because that's a really marvelous story. There's lots of these interesting things that often don't get covered, but you can cover them if you set that as a goal. Most textbooks aren't written that way, though.
Yeah, and I think that you are absolutely...
Yes, and let's get to that, and we can continue this discussion, but I'm told that we're going to start moving off the stage, but let's continue that
But
question.
I do agree with him, Russell, that, in physics is definitely not doing a good job of showing how physics applies to our life. And like we talked about this morning, quantum computing, quantum communication, quantum sensing, all of those things are application. But if we actually don't talk about the applications of physics or how it connects with humankind, a lot of students from minoritized backgrounds are not going to see value in a discipline that doesn't connect with their life. So I think that it's the privileged people who just are doing it for the joy of figuring out Higgs bosons or something like that. But the point is, you're right, that the people who have less privilege are the ones who are saying, how is it going to help my community? How is it going to improve humankind? I really want to see that, the world that I live in, the communities that I live in, are actually better off because of what I am doing. And so yes, we should be focusing more on what you're saying, and we are not doing it right now. So we really need to, and quantum information science and technology could be one venue, because it has a lot of great applications that could really be transformative. So thank you so much. Sorry, Russell.
Right. So it looks like we might have had a little early, taking the mics a little early. We're still waiting for the next group to come in, but I know that we want to, and Tim has asked me to kind of keep things going if possible. So Willie, I don't know if you have anything to say, but one thing I wanted to add is the fact that these conversations are coming to a sort of central concept. And I know this is surrounding this idea of what it means, or what does it take to be successful in quantum. And first of all, absolutely, there's all kinds of positions and all kinds of skills and diverse sets of people that need to be brought into any field. But something that's specific to quantum is that the workforce, yes, there's an opportunity, and we need to try to take advantage of that opportunity as minoritized communities. However, quantum right now needs minoritized communities. Quantum needs people to struggle on some level. Jim said it, Chandralekha has said it, it's difficult. Struggling is part of the process. And as minoritized communities and individuals, that's something we're very comfortable and experienced with. And so that's the kind of thing that can progress. Quantum workforce is those types of skills and those types of perseverance, not just the preparation. And that's what makes good soldiers, that's what makes good athletes, that's what makes great scientists, is competition and perseverance and passion. This is Lily Milner coming to introduce the next session.
Thank you, Russell. You know, I was waiting for the handstands, you know, the flips that I'm used to you doing. Russell is one of the most enthusiastic inner city quantum individual I know. We're excited to be here, and one of the things that you're going to find out is we want this as interactive as possible. I'm Lily Milner. I'm with Build It Up, and I'm also on the National Hub Zone Council, which is important because 80% of the HBCUs reside in what we consider hub zone areas, which is a business zone, historically underutilized business zones. And that becomes really important when we increase our workforce in the quantum area. So our session is about the future of quantum, the federal funding for literacy and, in fact, research. One of the things I like to tell people is an African proverb, and I think you're going to think it's really important here. It's about examining what is said, not the person that's saying it. What's important during the next 2 days is examining what is said, whether the young people said it or whether it's one of our subject matter experts here. It doesn't matter where they're from, it's the content of what they're saying. So please just hear them and take it in. And if something they said influenced you, influence someone else with that. So one of the things I want to start with is spending just a minute or two introducing my wonderful colleagues. I'll start in the far right with our subject matter expert on everything quantum, Scott.
So hello, everyone. Scott Buchholz. I work for Deloitte Consulting. I lead our efforts to explore quantum computing. From our perspective, when we look at that, for us, what that means as a consulting organization is helping understand what does quantum computing mean for us, what does it mean for our clients, and how can we collectively best engage in the space as we move forward.
Thank you.
My name is Howard Berg. I also am from Deloitte. I lead our government and public services contracts organization, and I have the responsibility for, our team has the responsibility for helping Scott and the teams that are delivering to our clients manage their prime contracts, as well as our subcontracts and small business office resides in our group as well. And I have to admit, I did not know what a qubit was until I got asked to come on to this panel. And from the sessions this morning, I'm really excited to kind of talk a little bit about, from a contracting perspective, how acquisition may engage in pushing the topic of quantum forward.
Teresa?
I'm Therese Mears, currently serving as the Acting General Counsel for the Small Business Administration. I have a political appointment with the Biden-Harris administration. I oversee all regulatory changes in our standard operating procedures, and have a real expansive view on all programs at the SBA. Prior to my role at the SBA, I served as senior counsel to Senior Senator Ben Cardin of Maryland, where I worked on all the pandemic relief efforts for our small businesses around the country, from Paycheck Protection Program, COVID EIDL, Economic Injury Disaster Loans, plus getting money out to our SBA resource partners to help educate the public on resources available throughout the pandemic.
Thank you. So I'm going to start with something really simple. This month is Hispanic Heritage Month. One of the things I had an opportunity to do as editor-in-chief of our Trailblazing magazine is to interview trailblazers throughout the country that were of Latino descent. Many of them came to the United States and English was a second language. And they talked about their struggles for literacy. So what I want to do here is, first of all, how many of you have English as, not your primary language? Do we have anybody here that English was not their primary language? Okay, so you know how important literacy is to you. That's the position that we have on this panel, the literacy and research. That barrier to understanding simple things was enormous for you individually, just where the bathroom is, the restaurant or whatever. When we're talking about quantum literacy, we have to be talking about some of the basic things. So when we open up and we're discussing literacy and what the federal government is spending in that, I want to remind you of what this month is about and how important that is for acclimating someone and using the gifts and skills for the nation if they're not able to speak that language and if they're not able to speak the quantum language. So I'd like to kind of start off with the discussion, which is blue-collar quantum and white-collar quantum. We need them both. So I'm going to start with you, Scott. A tidbit.
I like to sometimes remind people that the technology that we're looking at today is not the first time we've invented a new piece of technology. I think there's an adage that says everything that was invented everything that was invented after you were born is technology. Everything beforehand is just stuff. So one of the pieces of stuff that I think actually makes a really good analogy is the automobile. If you think about what we do today, we, as is very pertinent to me, teach teenagers, like mine, to drive cars. And as part of that process today, teaching them involves not just teaching them the rules of the road and the mechanics of driving, but also what does it mean to be a defensive driver, right? Because that is where we've evolved to. That's the knowledge that they need to efficiently and effectively move around. If you roll back 100 years, in order to drive a car, you actually needed to be a mechanic. And you didn't need to know defensive driving because there were only 12 cars on the road and they were mostly horses. So you were mostly dodging horses, but a lot of what you were doing at the time was repairing your car so it would keep going because cars were not reliable and they tended to break down. The result is that there's a natural shift in what's important over time. And as we start introducing technologies, sometimes more of the mechanical understanding is important, but what winds up happening is there's a shift over a period of time to be an effective user of the technology as opposed to the mechanic. I think what we have a tendency to do is look at the state we're in and project that that is what we all need going forward. So because today everybody has to be a mechanic or a physicist or what have you, that somehow that's what everybody's going to need in the future. I don't know that that necessarily holds. I think what might be more important is helping people understand what is the nature of what we're talking about enough to understand the implications to be a good driver, as opposed to everybody needs to learn quantum mechanics. Now, that's Scott's opinion, and as usual, that and $5 will buy you a cup of coffee. But I like to encourage people to think about the evolution of things as opposed to just the point that we're in.
And what's wonderful about that analogy, Scott, is that foreigners drive all the time in the United States. Mm-hmm. They know enough to be able to drive. Mm-hmm. So that literacy is enough of that language of what a stop sign is and what that is in order to move forward. Can you add to that, Teresa?
Absolutely. I'm so glad you brought up Hispanic Heritage Month. Actually, a bit of my background. I'm first generation born in the US. My mother was born in Cuba. My grandparents came to this country with my mother and her sisters, not knowing any English, not having anything, essentially rebuilding a life in the US. And so that first generation that lands never really has the luxury of pursuing their passions or their dreams, right? Because they have to immediately learn the language, they have to immediately understand the culture, the customs, and get employed and create stability for a family. So it's always after you pass those hurdles that the next generation has a little more luxury to be able to pursue further education, to pursue other forms of employment, to pursue and essentially explore their passions, because there's a little more runway of financial stability. And the ability to become knowledgeable, right, when you're in a country is just, it gives you essentially so much more leverage. My parents didn't realize and didn't have the knowledge base of the Small Business Administration. They didn't realize that there were programs that were in the federal government where they could think of and pursue opportunities to supply the federal government or opportunities to contract with state and local government, because they weren't thinking along those lines. They simply didn't have the knowledge base. They never thought about pursuing a grant like our SBIR, STTR programs, or even thinking, oh, can I go to a website and see where I land on the HubZone map to see if I can potentially be certified as a HubZone business, to then pursue contracting opportunities, or as a MBE or as a WBE. That all became knowledgeable a generation or two later, understanding how to use and leverage federal contracting programs, federal certifications, federal grants. But I just want to lay that out there because it is literacy, it is understanding the tools that federal agencies can have and provide for the development of technology, for the development of goods, for the development of services that are critical to addressing our, it can be national security like quantum or other specific industries that the federal government is actively pursuing.
And what I love about what you said, Teresa, exposure. What we're talking about with literacy is exposing our ROTCs, exposing the next generation to the impact quantum will have in their generations and the generations to come. And this is the perfect time to do that, to provide that exposure. We have now multiple generations of young people coming out of HBCUs that their parents and their grandparents were from HBCUs. You see that emerging. So that is the perfect time to grab them and pull them into that quantum arena. Howard, how would you add to that?
Yeah, I just kind of thinking about Scott's analogy. I have a military background. I was in the Air Force for just under 11 years. And after active duty, went into the civilian corps and stayed in because I was so attached to the mission. And I was in the acquisition corps, right? And so one of the things I really took pride in is understanding how what I was doing was connected to the warfighter and where the mission was. And I tried to play an engineer on TV when I was a contracting officer. I wasn't a technical person. I wasn't the engineer in the room, but I always wanted to understand what it was that we were buying and what I was buying and how it was really affecting, what we were really there for, which is the mission. And I liken that to the analogy of the progression of quantum, in the sense and the importance of literacy, because all of the stakeholders that are here play different roles. And I think as we try to push the topic forward, having all the stakeholders involved, whether it's a contracting officer, whether it's a technical rep, whether it's the scientist, all kind of being able to speak the same language, just allows us to pick up momentum. And I think as we kind of look at where we are, kind of on the maturity cycle, if you will, from an acquisition standpoint, we're talking about a lot of basic research. We're talking about the SBIR program, and it kind of goes back to where we were, I think, with basic cyber a little while ago, where we were just trying to figure it out and how it was going to be implemented in our particular spaces. And with that additional or that increased literacy and understanding what the impact of in this case, quantum is, we'll just continue to move forward and give folks the comfort, I think, to be able to talk about how we can actually, get involved and push it forward. Admittedly, we're calling Scott our subject matter expert, but the topic of quantum, I was speaking to someone in the back I actually graduated with from college, and we were talking about how big a topic it is and how kind of amorphous and it's not tangible to us right now. But sessions like this and hearing the talks that kind of bring it to kind of call it blue collar or quantum without having a physics degree is really important, because we've got to be able to explain it to our lawmakers. We've got to be able to explain it to the people that are going to support the process as it moves forward.
Thank you. What I'd like to do is something a little bit different. I'd like to open it up for some questions to our wonderful panelists right now. And we do have other things we could discuss, but one of the things we all decided in the back room was the reason you showed up is because you have some questions, and why not ask them now? So I know the mic's going around, and if you have any questions, please feel free to jump in. Any takers? First question?
Oh, there we go. I got it. Unless you want. All right. I'll sit down, no problem.
Mr. Willie is a man of wisdom. Let the young person go and do that.
When we talk about federal funding and contracts, I know NSF is here. Can the panel or someone in the audience actually address whether or not there are actually RFPs out there or contracts related to quantum that some of our audience can maybe apply for? Anyone?
In some of the work that we're doing, and for sure there are RFPs, some under the guise of quantum, me understanding a little bit better now what the topic is about. They aren't necessarily, I think, in the core of what we've been talking about here this morning and today, but especially under the SBIR program, I know that NASA has a number of programs, and we kind of talked about the public-private partnership approach this morning, and there's a lot of opportunity, in agencies, in DoD and NASA, in that space. So not necessarily traditional RFPs per se, but lots of broad area announcements and requests for information and the like. Again, I think representative of where we are in the kind of the maturity cycle from an acquisition standpoint. It's such a long game as to kind of what the deliverable actually is from a quantum standpoint. I think it's hard for agencies to necessarily write a defined RFP that says, go deliver this outside of the research and development framework. So there are some out there, not huge dollars, but there are a number out there.
And in addition to that, in addition to everything Howard said, some of them today, the RFPs, because RFPs tend to be sort of fixed scope and known outcomes and things, are more focused on some of the cybersecurity aspects that are currently viewed as more immediate and more tangible and being driven a little bit more by some of the executive orders than there are some perhaps more of the research topics.
And one of the challenges I think that was said this morning was they need to put more zeros behind it, because when you're talking about the SBIR money where it might be $1 million here, $2 million, it's not a lot. It really is pennies to the kinds of research and capacity you need to build in order to do this. So a lot of the things that we're seeing are coming from the private sector because you can't afford to do it on the federal dime at this point of what we're seeing. Would you agree?
Oh, we're always fond of more zeros.
And I think also, Lily, I think that it's not only the the affordability aspect of it. I think, to Scott's point, it's really defining it. And because dollars are so immediate and the budget cycle is the way it is, the near-term requirements are the things that are in front of you, and they're kind of the shiny objects. And so because the deliverable and the outcomes for quantum are so far out, even with like building an airframe, you kind of know what you're going after. You understand the development cycle may be, 15 plus years, but it's not, right now, it's not tangible. And so I think that's part of the literacy piece, is to understand you have to invest now for what you're going to get as a return on investment later.
Just to quickly comment on the question from the gentleman in the back, on behalf of National Science Foundation, which I represent, in the last few years, we have developed about a dozen of new programs specifically for quantum. We did have pre-existing programs that specialized in quantum, various aspects of it, and we also have at least 100 different programs that welcome and encourage submission of proposals that are related to quantum, even though the programs themselves do not maybe mention quantum per se. We operate through dear colleague letters and solicitations mostly. So the most recent one, I encourage everyone to Google it. That's what we do these days, Google things, is Expand QISC. Expand QISC is a solicitation developed especially for those institutions of higher education who do not currently have or only have nascent effort in quantum, so they can build this ownership, critical mass, infrastructure to pursue quantum in connection with established efforts, but funding goes to those places that do not have it currently. Expand QISC.
So I'm going to keep you mic'd. So I'm going to act like my dear loving friend, Tim Akers. How are you measuring, because he would have said something like this, how are you measuring that? Because you said you have all of these programs and literacy is important, and we have Department of Education that's always measuring, are folks understanding, are they able to apply? You have this bucket of money, how are you measuring it? And not only how are you measuring it, how effective is it?
Oh. I can answer by speaking loudly. Thank you so much, sir. Yes, so the bucket of money is the recurring question in the government, especially lack of it. In the core programs, like if you go across NSF, say in MPS we have 5 divisions, physics, materials, astronomy, mathematics, and chemistry. Each of those divisions has a budget, DMR, Division Materials Research, where I manage condensed matter physics program. It has $330 million budget per year. And that funds the core programs, some of which, like my program, have historically funded efforts in quantum materials, right? But when it comes to those initiatives that couple together all of NSF, we do not have a specific budget for that. So what you end up doing as a program manager is you knock and beg, knock at doors and beg your colleagues for money. And yes, you can get $100 million in a few years. It's very difficult. And as I keep driving my bosses nuts with that, I will just continue doing so because, again, this is a secure room. This is not how it should be.
Okay. Thank you.
One over here.
I was told I should share this information. For any of you who are educators, I'm outside of this world now, but when I was a grad student at Oak Ridge National Lab, we participated every summer in a program which funded HBCU professors and students to come to the lab for the summer. And you might think, oh, it's an internship, oh, it's a way for kids to spend summer. But at the national labs, especially at Oak Ridge where I was, you have equipment that no university has. You have particle accelerators, you have supercomputers all over the place. I was in the quantum information science group, so we did quantum optics before it was cool and people knew the term quantum. But every summer we would have a professor or 2 or 3 bring 2 or 3 or 4 students with them. And I know this is an issue, equipment. At these schools which are underfunded, you do not have equipment. So you do not have access to even Maybe you don't even have an SEM, so if you want to do some material science, just looking at fractures or looking at material failures, you can't even do that on facility, but you may have access to a place where you can line up a summer's worth of work. And I do not know the doors for you to go through to get this, but I know every summer that those opportunities existed, and very likely, I can't fathom they still do not exist. So if you do something that you think is hard, or maybe you want to look into, there's people who would be excited to have you come in their lab in the summer and poke around and try not to break stuff, but sometimes you break stuff. So that's how you do science.
Thank you.
Actually, that sounds like the Visiting Faculty Fellowship program, the VFP. I was actually a VFP at Fermilab when I was a faculty at Chicago State University. And they had to be, because there really aren't any programs quite like that. And it's not the same, like he was saying, as just a summer research type of experience. If you connect with the right group, this is something that that can establish long-term relationships with the universities. And this is the kind of model I'm trying to build out with other partners, especially in the Chicago region, but across the country. So thank you for bringing that up. Yes. Why I'm here, one of the only reasons why I'm here, along with Chandralekha, honestly.
I think you had a question further down. Stanley, you still have your question? Right there. Further down. Russell, you're almost there.
Yeah, Stanley Tucker, and I think I spoke this morning about why I'm here. Because of this new quantum literacy, one of the things I do know, so I've been in this for about 40 years, that ultimately it involves into wealth creation. And so I'm here really, I'm trying to understand the industry, of course, but also a little bit trying to get ahead of the curve to see, where are the wealth creation opportunities? Because when I look at the headline, it said funding and federal funding and contracting. Our organization, we started on providing funding for minority women-owned businesses around government contracting, and it grew from a little small piece to now it's fairly decent size. So ultimately, what I do know is that eventually this quantum literacy is going to create wealth. And so I'm here trying to understand at what point are there going to be wealth creation opportunities in the form of contracts, et cetera, to do that. So if some of you on the stage could help me out with that, but that's what I'm trying to understand.
Now, Teresa, I know the legislation has passed already? Or it's still, I think it's in the last moments?
This is the, referring to the SBIR,
Right.
STTR, so Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer Programs. This is a program that sits in the Small Business Act, and that the Small Business Administration helps to administer across the federal government. Congress did successfully reauthorize the program for an additional 3 years till September 30th, 2025. So both the House and Senate passed the legislation, and so there'll be no disruption in this program. And so there's the opportunity to get grant dollars into small businesses that are focused on research and development within the area of quantum. But you also have to be able to position yourself to answer a call from a federal agency who's exploring this, this area, this topic.
So what she's saying is you have to have that match.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would add is, I kind of mentioned the maturation. I mean, I think what you're looking for are more substantial contracts that would be available for businesses to go after. And I think, it's interesting, this morning we were talking about the timeline for the maturation of the technology to be kind of mainstream and be viable. It'll be interesting to see how the contracts go along with that, because we were talking before the session, the one contract that I think specifically mentions quantum right now that it's on most people's radar is the Polaris Small Business Track contract that's coming out, the big IDIQ or GWAC that's coming out. There are a number of contracts that would allow for that scope, But until I think the requirements get firmed up and we can actually define what we're asking businesses to deliver outside of the research, you know, I think what you're looking for as far as wealth creation may be paced by that, right? I'm no longer on the government side, so I can't speak for, you know, what our clients are thinking and where the requirements will go, but it just seems to stand to reason based on where we are in the maturation cycle of the technology. The contracts will you know, follow that path as well.
And something Howard was saying about Polaris, that will be due shortly to the government. And if anybody has worked in government contracts, you know CIOSP 3, you know CISP 4, you know that it may be 2 years from the award. So then that vehicle will be available for all the agencies using a GWAC GSA schedule is doing that. So that's not going to be available probably for 2 years.
Potentially.
Yeah. So we're hoping against hope.
I want to pick up on something that Howard said earlier, and you referred to it yourself. There are some opportunities for quantum funding, but the field itself is so dynamic. Are there opportunities for someone to come and present a program, a concept for funding that has not been put out on the street in a solicitation? Is there a mechanism for something like that?
I mean, some of the programs like broad area announcements, again, mostly from a research perspective, are looking for things like that. The different phases in the SBIR program will allow for, you know, I'll say novel concepts to come to the table and then mature over time. And then you always have the unsolicited proposal route, which is not one that is easily traversed. But those are the ones that I would be aware of and I would throw out as potential options.
And I think another piece that came out of the HBCU conference last week is because they look at a university as a research institute, but also literacy and education, that is probably going to be where we see some things really start picking up traction this year.
Okay, thanks. Hi, I'm Luke Moritzen from Montana Instruments, and Montana Instruments creates cryogenic systems for quantum systems. So we're an example of a company in the quantum supply chain. My question is, I wonder if I understand the SBIR program as it is today, and I have only tremendous things to say about it. In fact, I learned how to spell cryogenics, you know, based on some SBIR tools, and so it was a great experience for me. Where many of the companies in the supply chain are at is needing investment to really transform technology to be able to keep up with the demands of the quantum computing industry and create what a quantum computer really needs to be. So there's a transformation of all that technology. What I guess my question is there, and it's very hard to bring private capital into those opportunities because it's hard to understand a true ROI on opportunities for hardware in the quantum computing industry, okay? Is there a conversation in the government or from the funding side to say, is there a way, is there a tool that the government can put forward, and it might be matching dollars with VC dollars, in a way that essentially incentivizes more private capital to be coming in and to making investments in the quantum supply chain because of the government dollars that could help de-risk an investment? Is that clear?
Absolutely. And thank you, Luke, for bringing up that question. And one program I wanted to point to you at the SBA is the Small Business Investment Company, SBIC program. It's a public-private partnership between private investors and the federal government, where the federal government will match $2 for every $1 private capital raised up to a certain amount. I actually just came back from a conference of the Association of SBICs, and absolutely SBA, we're exploring opportunities to partner with other agencies across the federal government to have that conversation of targeting dollars, perhaps through the SBIC program, into companies that are developing mission-critical services, mission-critical goods, to be able to have that public-private partnership to essentially what you said, de-risk that investment. But it's essentially being able to find those types of investors who have built these types of investment vehicles like the SBIC, and to position yourself as a potential portfolio company within their portfolio of investments. So that is one program to just put on your radar, and for the audience radar, if you're not familiar with that.
Thank you. And our last
Thank you.
question is from...
Yeah, just to complement the question from the professor of vehicles, another vehicle that I think we should explore as an industry and group and academia is the OTAs. OTAs is made to accelerate the process. Some RFPs take a couple of years, they get canceled, they get protested. But I think in quantum security, in quantum communication, a couple of niche areas, of course, quantum training, but the cyber piece, some of the machine learning, in the logistics, if we focus us together in some OTAs, and for people that are not familiar with OTAs, it's a vehicle that is officially approved by the government, where you can reach out an agency and have a conversation with the CTO, with the very senior people. This is the concept, does it match your needs? If they say yes, you write a 2-page paper, and they may invite a couple of our companies, and then if everything goes well and aligned with their needs, you win it. So it's a nice vehicle that I propose that we start encouraging and have this dialogue all together to accelerate the quantum. And the amount of OTA, the value, it could be $1 million, it could be 100 million, could be $1 billion. So don't be shy on the number of zeros. They could expand to the right if there is the right solution for the right moment. So that's another vehicle that I think we should look seriously. And the time to market, the time to implement, it really is very, very fast.
Yeah,
Thank you, Manny.
The one thing I would add about OTAs is that do your research before you go after them, because there are certain agencies that have OTA authority. And so you want to target those agencies with that type of conversation. But they're technically non-FAR-based instruments, and they're very flexible in what agencies can do in getting to market, like you said. So definitely a good instrument.
And that's other transaction authorities for folks that are going, what is OTA? And I do want to mention our NSF person here. Afterwards, you might want to ask them about the new directorate that was just stood up that is about that private partnership and innovation and what have you. That may be a way to open the door. So we're at the end of our time. Is there any closing remarks from my wonderful panelists? I think you worked them real hard. They're saying no. Thank you again for spending time with us.
All right, everybody, we're gonna keep this rolling here with the next panel. Here we have Chandrika Singh and we have Tomasz Dirkowitz. Tomasz is from NSF, as you just heard, National Science Foundation, and of course, Chandrika is from University of Pittsburgh. Please.
Much, Russell. So, I'm not from a national lab, but I've definitely collaborated and written papers with people from national lab. And we all know that there is a lot of great quantum stuff going on in the national labs, in many of the national labs, and also a very large part of the federal R&D money actually goes, science and technology money actually goes to the national lab. So I'm again going to emphasize that national labs do have a major role to play in quantum literacy. And so, I just wanted to start out that, 100 years ago, the first quantum revolution took place, and that gave us, lasers and, transistors and the entire semiconductor industry, nuclear energy, etc. And now we are in this time of second quantum revolution, and it's a great time, because we are the exquisite control and that we have over quantum systems and the way we can manipulate them and probe the quantum states of matter, it's unprecedented, right? And that is really going to actually give us huge advantage in quantum computing, quantum sensing, and quantum communication, right? And we all heard about how quantum superposition and entanglement will play a major role in this area. This morning, Mark Ridders did a good job. But I again want to emphasize the fact that when we are thinking about quantum literacy, one of the things that we should be, again, looking at this picture that has come up many times, and one of the things that I want to emphasize about this picture is who's missing. If you look at this picture, these are, twice we have already heard that these are the founding fathers of the first quantum revolution. But if you see, prominently, there is only one woman, Marie Curie. And every single person in this picture is white. So that means that we have really left out a huge part of our population, and that has really deprived us of all the innovations that we could have actually done. So, and if you look at a picture from physics, for example, recently, it doesn't look very different from that picture from 1927. So that means that physics doesn't have very much diversity even now. But at the same time, I would say that we also heard that the great thing about the second quantum revolution is that it's a transdisciplinary field. It is not physics, it's not computer science, it's not electrical engineering, it's none of these disciplines. It's actually a mixture of all of these, which means that nobody can claim to be an expert in all of the different parts of quantum information science and technology. If you are somebody who's developing algorithms, or if you're somebody who's trying to actually think about like superconducting architecture for making qubits, I mean, the point is that people are experts in different areas and not in everything. And I hope that in this kind of a transdisciplinary culture, we can set a culture that is different from the culture of physics, computer science, electrical engineering, and chemistry, and other fields that have actually traditionally been part of like the first quantum revolution, where we have seen very little diversity, equity, and inclusion. So this is a picture that shows the bachelor's degrees in physics. And by the way, like whether you look at bachelor's or graduate degrees for women, it's like 20%. But here I'm showing to you that the number of bachelor's degrees every year in the United States keeps increasing. But when you look at racial and ethnic underrepresented students, like Hispanic students, 9%, Black and African American students, 3%, Native American, 0.2%. Like that's, significantly lower than their representation in the population. Similarly, this is for electrical engineering. Again, very similar numbers. Here are the numbers for computer engineering, very similar. So again, one of the things is, why is it that these populations have traditionally been left out? We need to very carefully think about what are we doing? And I already showed this picture before. If you look at what is happening in physics in terms of students who are actually enrolling in physics as a major and then dropping out, what you see is that 38% of all of the students who declare a physics major drop out. And then with regard to the racial and ethnic minority students, 65% of them are dropping out. So that means physics happens to be one of the worst. Now again, I want us to think very carefully about what is it, are we creating a culture in which, like students from minoritized groups don't feel like they belong? They're not being provided with the opportunities and support and the guidance and mentoring that they really should be given. And the other thing that I wanted to say is that quantum literacy is something that, that should start early. Because if we only focus on college level, then we have already left out a lot of students. Because only the very privileged students actually already enroll in like electrical engineering or physics or chemistry or these traditional disciplines. Whereas, like at the K through 12 level, we have much more diversity in student preparation. So if we start quantum early, first of all, it will not be spooky. And the second thing will be, we will actually be getting a lot more students from diverse backgrounds excited about a field that they might otherwise never have heard about. So this is really important. And the other thing is that if you really talk to people in quantum industries, one of the things that you find out is that the quantum industries used to be very heavy on PhDs in physics, but the landscape is shifting, and they're looking for more and more people who just have an undergraduate degree and not necessarily in physics, not, like they want people with very, very different backgrounds. They need people who are going to actually do quantum communication, people who are going to be, think about the business, people who are venture capitalists, people who are going to make policy decisions, people who are actually going to do, programming and coding, software engineering, algorithm, mathematical modeling, electronics, logic gates, cryogenics, vacuum technology, data acquisition, troubleshooting, people, fabrication and processing, product management, writing and presenting, and just communicating with other stakeholders. So we need people from lots of different backgrounds. And again, quantum literacy is going to play a key role. And no, we don't need to only have people with physics backgrounds or electrical engineering background. We need people who are broadly educated about what this broad area of quantum is. That's going to be our future. And it's going to really revolutionize a lot of different things, because the applications of quantum are, we can't even think about all of the different applications, but we can tell that it's going to actually have really great application, because quantum computers, quantum sensors, and quantum communication is really going to revolutionize things, in addition to having spin-offs in other areas, just like the way we saw in the case of space race. So I want to say that national labs can play a key role in doing outreach to K through 12 education or informal outreach, as well as what our colleague from Oak Ridge National Lab said. He had some really great points about how you can actually have, say, for example, students, undergraduate students or graduate students coming to these labs, and especially those from minoritized backgrounds, especially those who actually are going to schools where they might not have those kinds of great lab facilities. They could actually maybe come even as part of their class, with their teacher in groups to see what kinds of equipments are there. And then in the summertime, maybe they can even work with some scientists over there to get exposure to the real science that is happening in these national labs. But the national labs also need to get the news out as to what kinds of things they are doing and how exciting the future is. Because again, there is not only not enough diversity in terms of academia in these disciplines, that are separate disciplines that together make these transdisciplinary field, but that's the case also in like national labs. There isn't that much diversity there either. And again, we need to do a lot to make sure that national labs themselves are diverse. So I would like to put out a new model for equity. So we need to make sure that by equity in quantum learning, what I mean is that we need to give to all students equitable opportunities. By that I mean access and encouragement and quality materials and learning tools, and some that is commensurate with their prior knowledge and skills, but also provide them with equitable and inclusive learning environments where they actually enjoy learning quantum, they have a high sense of belonging, they are not afraid to speak their mind, they're not afraid to actually say, this is what I'm thinking, because as we said, struggling is an integral part of learning new things. So students need to know that when they're struggling, that is something to be proud of, because nobody has learned anything without struggling. So actually, that is a really important thing that many of the students, especially those from minoritized backgrounds, do not know. And we need to explicitly tell them that that is something that they should embrace, because failure is not really failure, but it's something that is teaching you something, and that's how you get to the next step and the next step. And last but not least, the outcomes must be equitable. And by that I mean all the different demographic groups should have very similar outcomes. And if we are not striving towards this kind of a thing, that means we are only focusing on the top students who already are coming with the most privilege, and that is not the right way to teach, because those students already will do well, and really our focus should be on providing intentional support to the students who have traditionally been left out. So I think, again, national labs have a key role to play, and they should join with industries and in academia to make sure that quantum field is much more diverse, equitable, and inclusive.
Wow. Thank you, Chandralekha. It will be difficult for me to follow that. I'm Tomasz Durakiewicz, and I'm a bureaucrat. I used to be a researcher. I spent 16 years at Los Alamos National Laboratory, looking at the electronic structure of plutonium, mostly plutonium-239, and some other interesting things, in making sure that we understand the corrosion processes, so the stockpile stewardship program can guarantee that the weapons are able to use in good standing when the president needs them. I'm very proud of that 16 years. It was a perfect mix of really exciting fundamental research, because plutonium is one of the most complicated elements you can imagine, where the F electrons are on the verge of delocalization, and that brings with it a whole plethora of interesting phenomenology, and correlated electron systems behave like crazy, and we want to understand them, but we have very little predictive power. So room to grow, room to understand, room to have fun. But on the other hand, it has the strong mission component to it, the ability to do something that you know is important for the nation, for the country. And there's not a lot of places other than national labs where you have that actual mix. It's very powerful. National labs were established to do the impossible at scale. So when you think about Manhattan Project, right, Los Alamos, we go way back, Oppenheimer, Enrico Fermi, von Neumann, Ulam, many, many others, great scientists representing the best of the brightest minds of the time, they were standing on the shoulders of a giant, General Leslie Groves, who made it all possible because he was unstoppable in delivering on time, whatever it was. A story is about him that when General Groves was asked by a chief of staff to build a fence around the moon, he only asked one question: when do you need it? Nothing was impossible. So you see, I look at national labs as this place where you can do impossible at very large scale. And today we are at this point, maybe in quantum, where we need to do the impossible at a very large scale. Many of you may remember the discussions we had before NQI Act of December 2018 about something called the Moonshine Initiative. It had nothing to do with a favorite drink in Tennessee. Moonshot English is my second language. Initiative is about coming up with an idea of the magnitude, complexity, and level of risk and impossibility similar to Apollo program, but in quantum. With the benefit of that being generating a wave of enthusiasm throughout the nation, interest throughout the nation, affinity to learning new things throughout the nation. Isn't that exactly what we need today? When we see teachers leaving the profession, when we see students dropping out, isn't that something that we could benefit from as an enterprise in quantum information science and engineering by creating a wave of enthusiasm for study, for work, for learning new things, but also in this perfect storm that we are in today, that has all the necessary elements ready. We have the all-of-government approach as described in the NQI Act. We have the attention of all the agencies across the government. We have the Quantum Coordination Office at OSTP, who is supposed to generate coordination of all these efforts. We have the industrial component, and we've seen it today, right? How much not only enthusiasm, but ideas and conviction that we will soon have the technology on the market, ability to invest rapidly and solve those problems that are key to industry. We have the academics, the absolute best of the brightest minds still reside in the US. And Vice Admiral Buck this morning mentioned China in the context of losing the edge. I strongly believe that he is right when it comes to translation. We have lost that battle, but we are still leading when it comes to ability to ask critical questions, which is the product of the brilliant minds working together and pushing the cutting edge of research forward. We still have that, but we are at the brink of losing that too. So these are the three components. The fourth component is the ability, maybe for the first time ever, to use and think of broadening participation, not as a problem, but as a solution. And then this enthusiasm comes from the fact that we need, for example, classified jobs. And at the same time, we have a whole area of underfunded, underutilized, forgotten institutions, such as MSIs, HBCUs, all the institutions across the EBSCOR states, the missing millions, as the NSF director likes to call them, that have historically been underrepresented in STEM, but now they not only have a place and a role to play, they can actually solve a critical nationwide issue. So there is a blessing and a curse when you say, may you live in interesting times. I think in the context of quantum, we definitely live in interesting times, but it is and it should be a blessing. And thank you.
I'm sorry. You got me going.
I have one slide to show, but maybe I'll show it in a few minutes.
No, you can show it.
I don't know how.
I will do my best.
So the slide I will try to show is a follow-up on what Chandralekha was showing.
Here we go.
Famous picture of Solvay conference that we've seen so many times today, but I added something to it.
There it is, right?
Yeah.
Here.
Okay. So yes, Marie Curie Skłodowska, Polish physicist, Nobel Prizes, is the only woman in this picture. Back then, women had no career in research, science, and education, academic level. Their job was to stay at home, cook, clean, have children, take care of kids. We have moved so far away from that image today, right? It's very, very different today. The way we think about the role of men and women is very, very different. And we hope and we believe that we've made progress in this area. But if you look at this picture, we see that representation of women on it is 3.6%. And in the first 30 years of Nobel Prizes in physics, it's 2.8%. Between 1901, there was the first Nobel Prize in physics, and 1931, 2.8%. So we must have done something to put us in a better position today, right? Wrong. Today, in the last 30 years, the participation of women in Nobel Prizes in physics dropped down to 2.6%. Another prize, which is a precursor to Nobel, Wolf Prize in physics, 2.5%. It's a little better in chemistry than it is in physics. Yesterday, fantastic achievements very important to quantum information science engineering, Nobel Prize for really entanglement. 3 white men. So the reason I'm showing this depressing statistics is to point out one thing. We are not doing everything we should. We are not making progress. We are not moving the needle when it comes to diversity, inclusion, broadening participation. We are losing this battle. And we need to understand that if we lose this battle, we lose everything else.
Let's take some questions. I saw Jib's first, and we're going to get right to you right there. You know what, I'll help.
Here you go.
So I just got an email from one of these DOE announcements, like maybe a day or two ago, which says now all DOE proposals are going to have a requirement of a equity and inclusion statement and plan, and that includes all the funding that's going to the national labs. So I have sort of a two-part question of this. How effective do you think that's going to be in trying to bring about change? Because it doesn't seem like it's very strongly evaluated within the evaluation process. And then the second part is, do you think this is something that other agencies like NSF are going to also be implementing?
Right. Can I start?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So I cannot speak for DOE, of course, but I forgot to mention there are 4 things I love. I love my wife, I love condensed matter physics, I love woodworking, and I love driving my bosses nuts. So in the context of the last point here, driving my bosses nuts, I constantly criticize the way that NSF works with broader impacts component. What we've seen a few days ago coming out of the Office of Science and DOE was really the announcement that you could think of it as their own version of broader impacts. They are now introducing. NSF has done it decades ago. And that was driven by the National Science Board, which is the body that oversees NSF and tells it what to do. And NSB actually came up with the concept of broader impacts. And in NSF proposals, you have 2 elements. One is the intellectual merit, which is your research, core research of your content of your proposal. And then the broader impacts, which is really how what you do will impact and benefit the society, the taxpayer, right? So within the broader impacts, you have activities that have to do with education, with broadening participation, with diversity, with outreach. And I'm very happy, actually, to see for the first time that DOE proposals will have that required element. But because I think we are missing the chance with broader impact component in NSF proposals already, I am not sure if that particular element will move the needle for us. And here, the key question here is, it's good that we have those. What to do next to make them impactful, right? Go away from the model where we have to check it as one of the boxes or our proposal will be returned without review. Go from here to the place where we actually are making an impact. I have some ideas about that. Happy to talk about it if we have time.
So I totally agree with Tomasz that, exactly how it's going to be implemented would make a big difference. Whether it turns into just a checkbox or whether it would be something substantive that would really make a difference.
Thank you. Have a question right here.
Yes, more of a question, but also more of a actual situation. I'd like for everyone to really think about this. Give a personal example. My son, who was here at this conference at the invitation of Dr. Akers, he has a master's in physics, very bright, but he hasn't been able to connect with any opportunities. And you ask the question, why? And you say the underrepresented years ago with all white men and one white woman. And if you look at today, and you have a person who my wife and I have been driving him, okay, I told him to good grades, get the education, etc., driving him, he was here today. Yet he left here today excited, but also disappointed in that he's still looking to connect up in this industry. Okay, so what's been happening, as we see years ago, it still exists today. So I think there really needs the industry itself, and those of us and you all that's involved in this need to get serious about if you're going to really want to get diversity, then you have to get serious about really getting. I don't think anyone's serious about getting diversity here. I'm living it. Okay? So I'm listening to you, but it has no impact on me, to be quite candid with you, based on what's happening with my son and other folks that I know, people of color, that's in this. So I was excited to come here. I am. I think Tim and his folks have done an excellent job in putting this to the forefront. But here we are in 2022, getting ready to go in 2023. Okay? And this still exists. And it impacts my wife and I personally. So I'm upset. I'm happy to be here. I think, Tim, you guys have done an incredible job. I really appreciate first being here and that you invited me. And I see all the people in the room, okay? But to me personally, it's rhetoric, okay? I'm an investor. When I put my money in something, I expect to get a return, okay? Not 100 years from now, but a return in such a time so it makes sense for me, my partners, and or for my community. So I'm happy to be here. I think it's a great conference, Tim, that you've put together, but all candor. I'm looking at what's going on with my son and other persons of color and other women that's going on in this country. I'm sick of it. And what's even more importantly, the talent that you're missing, that you're leaving out. It's criminal what's going on in this country and in this industry. It's criminal. We could be so much further along as a country and as an institution than where we are. And we have to face up to it and stop messing and looking around and trying to overlook it and whatnot. It's real, folks. It's impacting our economy when you're not maximize the talent in your country. Thank you very much. You can tell I'm very emotional about this because I'm insulted.
Thank you so much. I think that everything that you're saying makes, is basically exactly what I would like to say, that the opportunity, the playing fields are not level, and people of color and women, marginalized people are not getting the same opportunities. So thanks so much for saying it so eloquently.
Sir, for you and your son to stop suffering, we need a revolution. Right now, we are pretending that we are in the evolutionary stage, but we're not. If you like horror stories, have a look at NSB reports. National Science Board publishes reports every year. And my hairs stand up on my head when I read those. We are not making any progress. NSB says very, very strictly and precisely that we are facing, among many other problems, institutional racism in the US. And we are not addressing it. That's right. In terms of broadening participation, the government approach, my agency's approach, and that irritates the heck out of my bosses, by the way, has been in the past and is today to produce epistemology. We found projects, excellent projects, that tell us how broadening participation happens, how it should happen, what are the obstacles for it to happen. Same with education and diversity. We fund projects in those areas, millions of dollars of federal funding. And then we stop. We do not implement this epistemology in real life. And we always find excuses as to why we don't do that. Oh, the local education, state education boards, and then there is a federal system for education, and then there's teachers and parents and local governments, and we have 50 states, every state has 50 different boards, and it's all the many-body problem we cannot solve. That's a typical excuse when it comes to education. That is not acceptable, and that's why we need a kind of revolutionary approach. But sir, the bad news is that notion of a need for revolution here is not widely accepted. I think that's why we have this meeting, right? To make the message clear, make it strong, distill it down to clearly understandable parts of a message that we can sell. We need those meetings, and I'm also very grateful for that organization and invitation. But sir, I also share completely your sentiment.
Absolutely. We have a couple questions here, and in the as I'm going over, students at Chicago State University are taking a quantum certificate right now. Look like they're all going to have to drop. People with masters in computer science. This industry, we are not able to support the communities that need it and are going to be most successful in it. And this is what we're all trying to figure out, the way out of this mess. Michelle.
Thank you. So I'm from the University of Arizona, and I have a job because I work with researchers and research teams, PIs, when they say, what do I do about my broader impacts or broadening participation? And so I'm under the VPR's office, and so I can work across not just in STEM, but anybody who needs help to articulate, plan for, implement, and evaluate their impact to society. And so we work really hard and try to do that genuine job. I'm here today because I'm also part of a convergence accelerator. I'm the lead for broadening participation, right? But in this instance, there is that divide that, well, that's a part of the science, right? Like, I can't take away from that. So I get to do this job, and there's this big division. One place where I do see it making a difference is in the career grants. I've worked with a lot of faculty who are really interested in making these deep changes for equity in their classroom and being that true sort of scholar researcher who is interested in diversifying. But I also have to say too that I have a master's in physics, but I don't have a PhD because I left because it broke my heart also to hear what young women were saying about themselves and self-selecting out of science and mathematics because of what our culture tells them, right? And so I really felt like I really wanted to be one of those wonderful professors who encourage their students. And I thought, that's way too late. There's so many young women who are self-selecting out. And so I went into nonprofit and did the work there. But I think that's why I got my job at the U of A, because I know sort of every organization, every nonprofit, every industry that's in Southern Arizona who is willing and has the capacity to partner and make changes. But it's hard work, and there's a few of my colleagues, we always talk about, there's just not enough, and it's always left to women, and it's always left to those who are not in academia, right? So that we don't have to put the burden on them. We can do that groundwork and try to make inroads with that way, but you're right, it's not working, and we're not changing enough.
Thank you. I know we had Charles over here.
So I want to be a little bit hopeful. So the numbers, sometimes numbers don't lie, but they don't paint the whole picture. I can tell you personally about my experience. My mom had me at 16 years old. She worked in a factory as a UAW worker in STEM for 35 years. Her son became an electrical engineer. Her grandson became an electrical engineer. Her granddaughter became a computer scientist, and her oldest granddaughter has a BS in health science. And before that, my family, my grandfather was a janitor for 35 years. My great-grandmother was a domestic. And so from where I sit, although we may not have a slot net picture in the 1920s, here in 1922, we have a different picture. I'm witnessing a different picture. I'm living a different picture. I'm affecting a different picture. And so really what the challenge is some of the mechanisms that we're talking about. The government hits the easy button when it gives out money oftentimes. The evaluation bar is high. They usually gives to the folks that had it before. And that's going to change. You just heard this gentleman say that. And so I'm hopeful, not frustrated. Your son's going to get a job. Tell him to pass me his resume. And I just want you guys to stay encouraged. That's it.
There was one last quick question, possibly, no? Okay, I think we'll go. Oh, I thought I had, okay, one last quick one.
Just to reinforce Charles' comment, my son just went to Manhattan College to study, and one of his classmates from Queens. And I asked her, how is the Queens High School? Well, 95%. I said, 95% what? 95% Hispanic. I almost fell on my chair. That's a major transformation. Of course, Queens is the second largest city of Colombia, but in reality, there are major trends happening there. And I just texted my wife, she's a STEM engineer in high school, of the 9 points for quantum, and she said, I'm already using 3 points. What? I almost fell off my chair because I was talking to her about quantum last week. She was stay quiet, but she said, I'm already applying 3. So things are happening. Of course, we need to accelerate. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Tomas.
Just one point that we didn't mention today yet, maybe there will be time for it later, but it's teachers. Teachers that are dropping out. It's not just students that are dropping out. Teachers are leaving the profession. They cannot sustain themselves. There are parts of US where teachers cannot afford rent, and they are being given options in affordable housing. People with mental problems and teachers are giving those options because both these categories of citizens cannot afford rent in some parts of the country. Teachers take second job or third job just to sustain themselves. We cannot talk about implementing curricula in this climate. We have to fix the problem of teachers dropping out for a good reason.
Excellent. Let's give our panelists a hand. And we had some...
No, stay there, please. Yes. If you guys don't, please just stay there. If you don't mind,
some,
just enjoy yourself. Relax there.
Right.
Please.
We had some very healthy discussion, and I think we have to be real about what's going on and with the data. There's a phrase that a famous civil rights woman talked about, and Stan, this relates to your argument. Her name was Fannie Lou Hamer, and she said, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And so as we look forward over the years, the numbers have not changed very much. Years ago, I worked for an organization called Quality Education for Minorities Network in Washington, D.C., and we tried to get more minorities in mathematics, science, and engineering, and here we're still struggling with that. So this whole diversity, equity, and inclusion piece is real, and we need to really face it head on. It is a national security imperative. So I just want to bring those comments. Tim and I will be talking briefly before we, I would say, dismiss you guys because I'm a former teacher. We always say class dismissed, but it's been a long day. But it's been a good day. We've had a good day today, so give yourselves a hand. And I commend you guys for being here today and being a part of this. And our last few words is simply why quantum literacy matters. And these two individuals have already addressed that. So I don't think we need to go back and rehash that. But I want to thank you so much for being a part of this today. I'm going to have my colleague come up here, Dr. Timothy Akers, and I'd like to give him a hand. I consider the two of us brothers from different mothers. We work very closely together. He tells me he loves me. I tell him I love him.
You do? Okay.
Sometimes. Sometimes. But anyway, we're going to close out. I'm going to have Tim say a few words in closing. And we're going to start this journey again tomorrow morning. I certainly hope that all of you will be back. Important highlights of the day for me was our keynote speaker this morning, Mark Ritter, who gave an excellent speech about quantum literacy and what quantum is all about. And then our students who were here who were asking some very good questions. So we're happy about that. And we had several panels that were very, very informative. So we've been on this journey about quantum literacy, education, and we're not going to stop. It doesn't end here. We're going to continue this journey. We're going to continue this fight for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we invite you all to join us. So, Tim, why don't you say a few words in terms of closing?
Thank you, brother. There's not much I can say except what our honored, distinguished speakers have already said, and I mean it from the deepest part of my heart. The only thing I was going to say is everyone in this room here is obviously committed to DEI, or you would not be here, period. And optimism, Stanley, I know you and I love your family, and that's what you're absolutely right. His son is brilliant. We know him very well. And Dr. Peters and I, for 12 years, were funded from 2008 to 2020 from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security in visual analytics. And we had taken students that the graduation rate that we eventually showed, Kevin, is 98%. And these were students that were just brilliant in areas. So we were able to get them and introduce different ways of learning and styles and viewing data. And then I look at this, for example, I look at General Ward and General Wharton. They're generals, retired generals, but they set the stage of where leadership comes in. As like General Ward said, doesn't not have to know it, but he knows what he needs, a lot of it. And this whole field, we just don't have a bunch of PhD physicists here, engineers. We don't have just a bunch of academics. We don't have just government representatives, respectfully. We don't have just industry. We don't have just academia. But realistically, we have a tapestry of diversity here. We literally are bringing people together. To me, let me ask you all a question. When you think of diversity, equity, equality, inclusion, what do you really think of? To me, I often say this, it's everybody looks like me, thinks like me, acts like me, talks like me, walks like me, and is trained and educated like me. Why do you need me? I have seen individuals that put me under their wing that don't look like me. They had a heart and they had his hue. Me being a high school, and I dropped out of high school. And I look at this, and I saw individuals, I went to wiring school, Votech school, and I saw individuals that saw something in a young man, and the military, officers, male and female alike, that did not look like me. They saw something in a young Appalachian boy who didn't see anything in myself. I didn't start reading until I was 8th grade. And then I look at this, if I can achieve things because I had professors and others like you who saw something, leaders, this is what diversity is. They didn't look at my hue, they looked at my heart and head. This is what I really believe. I look at some like Stanley, like your son and others. He's brilliant, you know, and the thing is that, and by the way, Charles, yeah, you want a copy of his resume? I got it. So having said all this, what we're looking at diversity in this is the first time, revolutions start with reconnaissance. We're recon right now. I'm former military, so I can say it. So this is a form of recon right there. And those who are military, raise your hand, raise your hand, raise your hand, raise your hand. Okay, yeah, so we know recon. That's what we've done. We filled out, we sent an announcement, we broadened it. We literally could have had 400 plus, but we had a budget, so we had to kind of cut it off. Sorry, folks. But this is what it came down to us. Bringing such incredible minds and experiences of individuals who are committed, government-wise, academic-wise, industry-wise. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I mean it from the deepest part of my heart. Thank you profoundly, because I have seen, and you have too, we went through hundreds when, thanks to National Science Foundation, supported us during the Convergence Accelerator. Our team, and some of them are out there right now, went through hundreds of photos. Am I exaggerating this? And we saw no one that kind of represented you, did we? Yep. And so we knew something was abnormal, not right. And so how do you find that genius like your son, Stanley? How do you find that? And I guess I'll shut up there, but is there any comment that you all want to share? I mean, this is just something I just want to let you all know that tomorrow there's a whole unique agenda planned. And at the end of that agenda, the end of it, Dr. Peters and I and many of you, we're going to have a call to action that's going to be presented that we're going to share with our leaders and others. And because we want to see where the National Quantum Literacy Network can serve as a catalyst, as a kicking off, a jumping off point for a lot of individuals that have historically never been part of this discussion and dialogue. And I sound like I'm a broken record right now, I apologize, but I just wanted to thank you from the deepest part of my heart. And I'm at a point and an age in my life to where I can be a little emotional now, so I don't have to impress anybody anymore. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
This ends our session for today.
Thank you.
There are some lunches left, so if you guys need a snack or something for the later on tonight, please grab a bag. And again, thank you so much. Okay.
Instructions for the bus, maybe it would be a good idea.
And yeah, the bus is out, and it will depart, I think, around 4:30ish or when it gets full. And there'll be another one as well.
Thank you.
Do you want mine too? Yes. Give me one. Oh, you already took it?
No, he didn't take it. Franklin? Go ahead. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.